even on the left hand side if you're facing forward shortly. Just before those, on the right hand side, that building perched on a hill, that's one of our follies here at Cube. So follies in formal sort of gardens are usually buildings that don't have a practical purpose as such, but are pretty places to sit and enjoy the views, often drawing on classical architectural styles such as Greece or Rome, or, as in the case of the Great Pagoda, Chinese architectural style, which we'll see later on. That folly back there was designed by the architect William Chambers. He designed quite a lot of buildings here at the gardens. He was a favourite architect of the royal family. And that folly back there was finished around the 1760s. It's been moved once, but it was called the Temple of Bellona, and Bellona was the Roman goddess of war. So here's a few camellias in flower still. On the left there's a nice red one. A little bit further down there's a couple of pink ones and a large white one. And actually black tea that lots of us like drinking, like your English breakfast tea, is a close relative. The tips used in your tea are from a very close relative of these plants, as the tea plant is Camellia sinensis. So it's rather nice large white camellia. We're just approaching it in the cab. If you look left, it produces white flowers with pink patches. Sometimes it produces a flower that's exactly half white and half pink, which is rather pretty. So a little bit about the history of the gardens. Back in 1759, Princess Augusta, who was George III's mother, she founded a 9-acre botanic and physic garden in the grounds of the palace and the orangery, which we'll see later. And about 100 years after that, the gardens transferred from the royal family to the government, and they opened for the first time to the public in the 1850s. And that was during the reign of Queen Victoria. Today, Kew Gardens covers 326 acres and is the largest botanical and fungal collection in the world. So to our left, just down the path going off to the left, is the two art galleries, the Shirley Sherwood Gallery of Botanical Art, which has a new show opening today, and the Marianne North Gallery, a marvellous collection of Marianne North's paintings. And there's a brand new summer show here, Food Forever. And one of the features are these two very large wooden trolls on the right hand side of the troll. They're highlighting the importance of food security and give you an idea of how much food is actually wasted. It's a very interesting installation from Denmark. Right now we're approaching the Temperate House, a marvellous conservatory, our largest conservatory and the largest Victorian conservatory still remaining anywhere in the world. It's home to over 10,000 plants from the temperate regions of our marvellous planet. And these plants help our scientists to tackle many world issues such as food security, climate change and loss of biodiversity. So the Temperate House was finished way back in 1899. It's looking in rather good order. It did have a full restoration job in 2018. And it was formally reopened by Sir David Attenborough, who actually came down on this train. A marvellous glass house there. So in a moment you'll feel a small little bump in your carriage. And then if you look right down that path, you'll see the Great Pagoda. And if you glance left, you'll see how that lines up with the back of the Palm House. And that path is called the Pagoda Vista. So we're just going to come to our first stop. This is stop 2 for the Temperate House, and the Pavilion Bar and Grill just ahead and to the right, and the art galleries over to the left. Okay, so we shall be continuing with the tour. So you'll notice, particularly over the next few minutes, you'll notice quite a lot of areas of grass that have been left long, with plenty of wildflowers amongst them, cow parsley and buttercups and things. And the gardeners have left lots of these areas to encourage insects and to attract pollinators. So it is to increase and maintain the biodiversity of the gardens. And right, just as I'm saying that, I can see a brimstone butterfly to the left of the train. It's just whizzing past, a lemon yellow. So the brimstone, it only takes flight when the sun is out. And he hops from place to place. But that's the exact kind of pollinator that we like having here at the gardens. And all these long grasses and wildflowers do attract those pollinators. So that glass building to our left we've just left behind is the Pavilion Bar and Grill. Most of the hot food is prepared on a grill, and many of the vegetables are from the gardens here at Kew. It provides lots of outdoor seating where you can enjoy views of the Great Pagoda. So I mentioned that Kew Gardens is a 326 acre site. It's a very large site, and you'll get a good impression of that as we go around, how large the site really is. We also have a sister site down in Sussex called Wakehurst, and that's made up of 535 acres. And Wakehurst is also home to the Millennium Seed Bank, a marvellous storage facility where plant species in seed form are collected and stored in a very secure facility. There is billions of seeds in storage, and they're constantly adding to that number. And these seeds are from rare and endangered plants, as well as everyday useful plants. And it acts as a global insurance policy, so if any species do become very scarce anywhere in the world that they have seeds from, they can reintroduce it later on. So in part, due to the seed bank down there, our whole living collection across both sites is by far the most diverse and massive of any botanical collection in the world. We have over 300 scientists working here at Kew, down at Wakehurst, and all over the world. In particular, they're working in Ethiopia and Madagascar right now, implementing what they've learned about sustainable cropping and so on. There's a lot of science goes on behind the scenes here at Kew Gardens. We're going to turn right at Lion Gate, the closest gate to Richmond upon Thames. And as we turn right, if you glance left, you'll see that there's a big lion on top of the gate where it gets its name from. He's got quite a trendy top knot in his mane. Obviously fashionable in the 1860s as well. We're going to wind our way down to the marvellous Great Pagoda. The Great Pagoda is actually one of our follies as well. It is by far the largest folly and the most substantial building, being a brick built structure. It was finished in 1762, and it was also designed by the architect William Chambers. King George III wanted a folly which acted as a gateway into the world of Chinese culture and Chinese architecture. And the Great Pagoda, when it first opened in the 1760s to his friends and family, was the tallest building for many miles around. And when we pull away shortly, you'll get a really clear view if you want to get a snapshot of it. So it's still a famous building in this part of Greater London. You can see it from quite far away. It's looked after these days by historic royal palaces. The staff are usually dressed in Georgian clothing, and they're based around the other side at the bottom, and you can get a ticket off them, about £4.50. And then, if you so desire, you can climb the 254-step spiral staircase all the way to the top, and enjoy views across to Windsor Castle in the distance, and in the other direction across the City of London. So it's a marvellous building. It had a restoration job as well in 2018, and all the dragons were restored to their original glory. These are new dragons, based on the drawings from the original dragons. And the dragons at the bottom there, they are wood carved, painted and gilded. But the dragons all the way up the rest of the pagoda, they're actually 3D printed. And then they're cast in a lightweight resin, so they can weather a little bit better than a wood-carved dragon, and they're a lot lighter, so they don't cause any stress to the building. You can see somebody right at the top taking a photo out the window. It is quite an arduous walk, 254 steps, so if you're afraid of heights, it's a little bit daunting. So shortly, coming into view on the right-hand side will be the Japanese garden, which is an evocation of 16th century Japan, with a symbolic landscape including rocks which represent the islands and the mountains of Japan, carefully raked gravel amongst the rocks which represent the sea going amongst the islands. And on top there's a beautiful little Japanese building called Chokushi-mon. That's a replica of the Imperial Gateway of the Winged Messenger from Kyoto in Japan. And if you see the path going down the side of the Japanese garden that just went on to the right there, that used to be a road called Love Lane, and it used to divide two separate royal estates. The historic royal estate that we've left behind us now was the Kew estate of Princess Augusta and Frederick, and the estate we've now entered is the historic Richmond estate that was looked after by King George II. So Frederick passed away quite young, sadly, and the crown passed on to George III, and he found himself inheriting both royal estates. And he decided to close down that road, Love Lane, and to join the two sites together. And that's why it's called Kew Gardens in the plural, because it's two old garden estates stuck together. It was quite controversial because Love Lane, it used to be a public right-of-way from Richmond to Brentford Ferry. But George III, he went ahead and did it anyway. He did have a strong interest in agriculture, and for many years he let the local farmers bring their cattle and their sheep onto the gardens to graze the grass. And he was far happier chatting with the farmers here at Kew about agricultural matters of the day than I think he was dealing with matters of state in Buckingham House in the City of London, Westminster. So we're just approaching a crossroads, and if you were to turn left, you would find yourself at Queen Charlotte's Cottage in a few minutes. If you look to the right, you'll see a lovely avenue of larch trees and lots more long grass and wildflowers and butterflies. So Queen Charlotte's cottage was a wedding present from King George III to Queen Charlotte. So very shortly after he took the throne, he organised a wife, and Queen Charlotte was deemed to be appropriate. Queen Charlotte of Bavaria. They got on very well. He met her one day, they married the following day, and he gave her the keys to Queen Charlotte's cottage, which is a very pretty little cottage. They went on to have 15 children, and they collected a menagerie of exotic animals over at the cottage with black swans, golden-headed pheasants, and some of the first kangaroos to come to this country. The train is about to drive over a large circle, so if you glance down you'll see this massive circle set into the path, representing the footprint and the diameter of an ancient North American redwood tree, to give you an idea of how massive they are in North America. And on the right, these are our tallest redwoods. The very first tree on the right is our tallest at around 40 metres. It stands about 10 metres less than the Great Pagoda. But these wonderful redwoods were only planted about 130 years ago. And as you can tell by the thickness of their trunks, compared to that massive circle we drove over, they've got a long way to go before they catch up with their Californian cousins over there. In the Sequoia National Park in California, the oldest known redwood is called the General Sherman, and it's between 2,500 and 3,000 years old. And the redwoods over there are the tallest living organisms on the planet, reaching in excess of 100 metres, marvellous species. So ours are mere babies or saplings in comparison, really. On the right, the pretty little water lily pond and a family of coots, some mallards and the occasional heron. Plenty of fishes for them to eat. So this part of the Arboretum, and by Arboretum it's just a Latin term for a place where there are trees. We have about 14,000 trees at Kew Gardens. This particular part of the Arboretum is called the Pineatum, as it's full of our evergreens, pines and conifers. We've got a rather nice maritime pine on the right hand side now, going off at a strange angle. So back in the seagoing days of the past, when all the vessels were made out of wood, those trees made fantastic masts, as they're lovely and strong and straight. The British Navy felled many hundreds of those in the Greek islands. In the classic boat building era. On the left hand side, through those trees, is the natural area. It's a marvellous area of 37 acres that's been left entirely in its natural state. And that's thanks to Queen Victoria. She held on to it until 1898. And when she finally left it to the rest of Kew, she had a proviso, which was that it must remain in its natural state. And that's exactly how it's remained. You can see the people emerging from that pathway on the left. That's the log trail, and there's a marvellous collection of logs carved into animals and mushrooms and things for children and families to climb on and balance on. They're mostly trees that have been blown down in storms or have been chopped down because they were too dangerous. So it's a marvellous place for families to have fun in the natural area. This is our next stop here for the natural area, and the River Thames ahead of us and our lake to our right. Okay, so we shall continue with the tour. So the natural area is a very important conservation area now. It has a lot of native British trees and wonderful range of wildlife, incredible biodiversity. Many dead trees are left to create wonderful habitats for our invertebrates, fungi, bats and bees and so on. And it's a really wild and romantic part of the gardens to explore. You've got the table and chairs back there left over from the Mad Hatter's tea party. You can have your own picnics down there. And to our left now, that winding path leads you into the woodland walk. So it's a lovely part of the gardens to explore. It's often a bit quieter because it's not so close to our entrance gates. So we're going to turn right sharply here to follow the bank of the River Thames. Good afternoon from Kalispera. Welcome. Just make sure you're still on board. Here's another one of our follies on the right. There's lots of these small ones, useful for getting out of the rain or just taking a rest. As we come out into the clearing here, you'll see across the River Thames a large manor house with a lion on top, and that's the London seat of the Duke of Northumberland, and it's called Sion House. Sion House is at the end of another vista. If you look all the way down to the right, there's a massive avenue of oak trees, taking your eye down to the Palm House again. That's the second of three monumental vistas. The Sion Vista. So Sion House there, it used to be a nunnery there. King Henry VIII dissolved the nunnery and he gifted the land to the Duke of Northumberland. The third vista is tricky to see, that makes the triangle of vistas. To the far right, over those geese, where you can see the people emerging from, that's the third vista, the Cedar Vista. And when there's no leaves on the trees, you can usually make out the pagoda at the end of that vista. But it's very tricky to do so when the trees are in leaf. So the three vistas form a very big triangle, and you'll see that on your maps if you've got a map. Right now we're in the Oak Grove, home to a marvellous collection of oak trees. You've probably seen the trees have these little black signs telling you their Latin science name and their common name. So on these oaks, the first word will be Quercus, telling you that they're oak family. And the second word specifies the exact species. You've got some Camassia there on the right, these white wildflowers with the slightly sharp looking petals. That's Camassia, or Camas lily, typical in many parts of North America, related to asparagus. And the bees really do enjoy those. And to our left, a lot more areas of wildflower. I can even see some bumblebees just relaxing amongst the cow parsley and gather a lot of pollen, then just take a little rest. And some beautiful buttercups coming up on the left, so you can see if you remind yourself if you like butter or not later on. On the right hand side is the marvellous rhododendron dell. There's over 800 rhododendrons down there. They're planted both sides of a lovely path that cuts through the landscape there. And that path was originally a design by the famous landscape architect Lancelot Capability Brown, and that was on the request of King George III. He wanted a flood barrier here and to create an undulating landscape down there. And this was once a flat floodplain for the River Thames, but in 1773 that all changed based on the designs of Capability Brown. The actual rhododendrons, which are looking absolutely stunning, I mean, just look at this one coming up on the right. They've had a nice drink the last few days, a lovely bit of rain. They actually didn't arrive until the 1850s. They were collected largely by our second director, Joseph Hooker, son of William Hooker. And he collected loads of those on his plant gathering expeditions to the foothills of the Himalayas. And that area provided a great place to plant them because they like clinging to the edge of hills and steep valleys, as they're used to in their native Himalayan regions. There's some absolutely stunning colours. We're just going to go past the path on the right. If you just glance down that path, you'll see a lovely purple one and a pink one a bit further down. Really stunning. If you walk down that path and you take a right, you'll go right through the heart of the rhododendron dell. And halfway down you will discover a traditional Japanese farmhouse called the Minka House, and Minka means house of the people. A beautiful timber framed building put together by Japanese artisans, and it's an original Japanese Minka house. There's several of them all around the world demonstrating the architectural style of the rural areas of Japan. And our Minka house, it has bushes of the sacred bamboo, Nandina domestica, planted around the doors. And these are believed to dispel bad dreams. Right now we're going to come to our next stop. This is for Brentford Gate to the left, the Ferry Lane car park again to the left, the rhododendrons a few minutes back where we came from, and the children's garden about a 5-minute walk straight ahead of us. Otherwise, after this stop we wind our way back to Victoria Plaza. Okay, so we shall continue. And there's a marvellous old tree coming up on the left hand side. Just behind the bench here, there's a beautiful Castanea sativa, or a Spanish sweet chestnut, about 200 years old, just come into leaf in the last few weeks. And we have a younger Castanea sativa coming up on the right, another Spanish sweet chestnut, possibly 100 years younger. It has nice spiralling patterns up the trunk before it develops the lumps and bumps that the more mature chestnuts develop. Our oldest tree at the gardens is another Spanish sweet chestnut, perched on the edge of the Mediterranean garden, about a 5-minute walk to our right, towards the Temperate House. And that one is about 300 years old. It's the wood that they make castanets out of down there in Andalusia, in southern Spain, used in the flamenco music. Wonderful old species. To our left, the hedge on the left is the perimeter of the children's garden, which is a play area for families themed around what plants need to grow. So each play area has earth, air, sun and water represented. We have a marvellous collection of eucalypts here at Kew. And on the right hand side we've got a nice Y-shaped eucalypt. And on the left we have a large number of eucalypts inside the garden. And the eucalypts are a very important species down there in Australia, where they're known as gum trees. Species such as the koala enjoy chewing on the leaves, and they have a soporific effect on the koala in that they make the koala very relaxed and sleepy, for want of a better word. This beautiful example on the right, its bark has mostly peeled off now. This is something that the eucalypt does to get rid of any pests and parasites and pollution that's been absorbed into the bark. And on the left, hopefully you can see a little bit over the hedge some of those marvellous eucalypts within the children's garden. We have 39 of the 900 known species of eucalypt here at Kew. Some species are highly prized by furniture makers for the wonderful quality of their timber. And a great deal of medicinal and herbal products are made from eucalypt. You've probably seen menthol eucalyptus on things like decongestant and toothpaste. Sometimes you can smell a very subtle eucalypt scent in the air around that corner. So the entrance to the children's garden is down there to the left. They have a controlled access because it's so popular they need to keep an eye on numbers. You can pre-book a time slot, there's no extra cost, it's just a precautionary measure to avoid overcrowding. We're heading on down towards the Orangery now, in the royal heart of Kew Gardens. There's a marvellous tree about 60 metres ahead of us, slightly to the right. It's possibly our largest tree by volume if you measured it in every direction. It's a chestnut oak, so it's a hybrid grown from seed. So it's an oak, but its leaves are chestnut-shaped leaves. A wonderful tree. And on the left, coming into view, is Kew Palace, the oldest building at Kew, built in 1631. With a lady from Historic Royal Palaces with her parasol out the front, ready to greet visitors. It's free, it's part of your ticket. I do urge visiting if you're interested in history. It's a very small, surprisingly small palace. It is in fact the smallest of all of Britain's royal palaces. It will be open until 4 o'clock. And it has lots of paintings and objects. It has the chair that Queen Charlotte passed away in. And it's a marvellous building, originally called the Dutch House. It was actually designed originally for a rich merchant called Samuel Fortray. And two of our kings lived there, George III and George IV. George III spent quite a lot of his life here at Kew. And we're now going to turn right to follow the